All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D and D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So today, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything comes out in 2 days from when I'm recording this. That means that I will be stopping anything else and focusing a lot on Tasha's stuff. So I wanted to make sure I got this map Mercer subclass out there. Mostly because I think it's one of the most well-known of his subclasses, aside from the Blood Hunter. And the Blood Hunter is well-known mostly because it got a new version, and they made a big deal about it on D&D Beyond, and there's a charity aspect to it. But this subclass was heavily featured in the first season of Critical Role. It was one of the first subclasses that was one of the first homebrew subclasses for 5th edition D&D that got a fair amount of exposure when Mercer released his first version of it. During the I think it was first few months or so of Critical Role, and then when the DMs Guild launched, it was one of, I think it had 3 subclasses that Mercer put out there pretty quickly, but by far, this one was, at first, the most popular. Excuse me. Of course, I am referring to the Gunslinger. The Gunslinger itself is one of those weird aspects of 5th edition D&D that kind of takes it a little bit away from the high fantasy setting we're used to seeing, and brings it a little bit more into the line of steampunk, to the point where gunslingers feel a little bit more at home in like Eberron instead of Faerun. That being said, mechanics wise, I think the Gunslinger is really interesting. It adds some new mechanics and aspects that creates a very unique way to play a fighter, to the point where a gunslinger itself does not feel like most of the other fighter subclasses when you're playing it. It really almost feels like its own class, which is really interesting due to the fact that a lot of times, like I mentioned with the Dragon Monk, if somebody has ideas for a new class, but they don't have enough to actually build a full class, they'll kind of shrink them all together and put them into a subclass or something else. And those generally don't turn out well because they change too much of the core aspect of the class. Gunslinger, on the other hand, works pretty much hand in hand with the aspects of the fighter class that make it the fighter. And what it turns into is it just modifies things enough so that it will play very differently and feel very differently, but the core aspects of the class are never discarded. They're never kind of pigeonholed in. Like, the whole aspect of it just kind of makes sense. So excuse me. had something in my throat. So much fun. Let's actually dive into to this now. As always, the quick reminder of a 5th edition class design. Every class should play differently. The things that define the class that make it play differently should show up within the first two levels. And the fighter is kind of interesting in that aspect, in the idea that the things that define the fighter are... it makes a lot of attacks. It gets more attacks than any other class in the game. And it gets this thing called Action Surge, which gives it an additional action on its turn. And with multi-attack that you get at 5th level and then get more at 11th level and then to the 20th level, that means you get an additional full extra attack as well. So at 11th level, your Action Surge will actually give you 3 additional attacks. So yeah, gunslingers, or not gunslingers, fighters get a lot of attacks. They also can take a fair amount of punishment. They can wear heavy armor right from the outset. And they get this thing called Second Wind, which effectively allows them to heal themselves as a bonus action. So anything in the Gunslinger subclass, which is a martial archetype is what they could call them, for fighters, should either improve the things they can do on attacks, or make it so that they can take more damage in general. That's what it should do. And boy, does it do that. So let's actually dive into this as a subclass itself. Starting at the 3rd level, you actually get to 2, or actually the 3 things right at the 3rd level. Which again, generally, if you get to too many things at a level, it tends to unbalance the game. However, 2 of the 3 things are effectively just proficiencies, and then the 3rd thing actually defines how the gunslinger will fight. So the first thing you get at the 3rd level is Firearm Proficiency, which is important because in the base version of the Dungeons and Dragons, so not using any Unearthed Arcana or any thing like that, firearms are mentioned in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but there's no proficiency built into any of the classes for them. So bare minimum, you would have to take a feat. Excuse me. You would have to take a feat in order to get firearm proficiency, which is a defining aspect of this class. So adding in firearm proficiency is essential for the class to work. It's one of the only ways to be proficient in firearms. However, firearms in the DMG are a little bit broken. They do a lot of damage. There's very little drawback to using them. So in the case of a choice between like a longbow and a rifle, the rifle is always better. Longer range, better damage. It's just a better choice. So in addition to adding firearm proficiency, they also add new properties to firearms to make them a little bit more balanced against other weapons. They add 3 things and then modify a property. First is a reload number. All firearms have a reload number. What it means is you can make that many attacks, and then afterwards you have to reload the weapon, either by using an action to do it, or using one of your attacks to do it. At a third level, when you get this, it means you're wasting an action because you only have one attack. As you get to higher levels, you'll be able to burn just a single attack, and eventually you'll be able to burn a bonus action. We'll talk about that later. So you can use your firearms more often. But that does mean that a rifle versus a longbow now actually has a deciding factor. The rifle may have a longer range and a higher damage than a longbow, but the longbow doesn't have to waste an attack every few actions or every other attack with some of them to get more ammo. So you're not losing any attacks of the longbow, but you're not doing as much damage. So this is one of the balancing things. Another balancing aspect, since firearms are still very, very, very powerful, is a misfire score. Misfire is an interesting thing that I actually really like, where you'll have a misfire number on every firearm. That misfire number means if on your attack roll you roll the misfire number or any number lower than it, your gun misfires, and you have to spend an action to try and repair it. And we'll discuss how that works in just a second here. If you fail, the weapon breaks and you can't use it until you mend it out of combat at a quarter of the cost of the firearm. Every firearm actually has a cost associated with it. And another thing, any creature who uses a firearm without being proficient in it increases the weapon's misfire score by 1. So you can just pick up a firearm and start using it, but it's not going to work as well in your arms, and you're not going to be able to repair it because you need proficiency in Tinker's tools to do that. And we'll get to that in just a second. The last thing that they add is what's called the explosive property, which means for certain firearms, if it hits something, everything within 5 feet of the target must make a dex save or suffer a d8 of fire damage. If the weapon misses, nobody has to roll anything because the explosive round didn't explode. So, which actually means that as a regular attack, you can do. Depending on the gun, the firearm that you have, gunslingers can actually have AoE stuff that they can do with just their regular attack, which again changes how the things work. The last kind of property that they modify a bit is ammunition. All firearms require ammunition, just like any other ranged weapon. However, their ammunition tends to be a lot more expensive. Like 20 shots for a pistol costs 4 gold, compared to 20 arrows or a bolt box costing silver, if I remember correctly. I have the darn thing in front of me. Maybe I should look at it. But yeah, so in general, it's yeah, it looks like arrows. Really, come on. So a bundle of arrows costs 1 gold point, a gold pip a piece, compared to again, for a pistol, it's 4 gold. For something like Bad News, which is a fancy like sniper rifle kind of thing. It's 5 shots for to 10 gold, so it's 2 gold a shot. Um, so gunslingers actually have to kind of weigh their options as far as ammunition is concerned, because every time they shoot, they are using gold, much more so than even rangers or other ranged attackers that are firing crossbow bolts or arrows. Because of that, the second thing that you get at the third level is what's called Gunsmith, which gives you proficiency in Tinker's tools and allows you to craft ammunition at half the cost. Also, it's what you use to repair your firearms when they're jammed or they're broken, and you can actually craft new firearms, which is a really defining feature of the gunslinger. Is they are a tinkerer. They're constantly making new things. In the first campaign, Percy was the gunslinger of the group, and he was constantly making new things. Just before the campaign started, he crafted Bad News, which was his sniper rifle that was used to great effect. And then he made a glove that would allow him to effectively zap people. He modified his pepper box many times. I believe he actually made another one because his first one, spoiler alert, gets destroyed in a certain scene that was very powerful and interesting. So, a part of being a gunsmith is tinkering and trying new things. One of my campaigns has a gunslinger, and we've had quite a few conversations about the kind of things he wants to do with his firearm as he keeps going. And instead of like building new guns and the things like that, he actually has been creating unique forms of ammunition that allow him to do things like he created a pinning shot that literally just fires like a bar into people to pin them against something, and stuff like that. Like, it's the whole point of the gunslinger is just being unique and interesting and creating your own stuff. So that gunsmith aspect is really interesting, really cool, and it's required to use firearms because you need to tinkerer's tools in order to clear misfires and the things like that. So yes. They do have a list of the firearms here. You are not limited to only the firearms here. They do mention that you can create your own kind of firearms. However, this gives you a pretty good spread of the different kinds of firearms you might find. You have a palm pistol, which is a very small one. A pistol, reload 4, misfire 1. So just a kind of standard kind of revolver thing with 4 chambers. You have a musket, a pepper box, and a pepper box, if you're not aware, as instead of having just a little part that pulls out in a single barrel, you actually have multiple barrels on a pepper box that you just kind of rotate through. But it was a real firearm. Then you get to blunderbuss, and then you have Bad News is specifically listed here, and then a hand mortar. Is the only one they have with explosive. Now, if you have a gunslinger in your campaign, and they want to create a different kind of weapon, go with what you have here as a guideline. Like Bad News is 2-handed, reload 1, misfire 3. But the reason that's it's so powerful is it has a short range of 200, a long range of 800, and it does 2d12 piercing damage on a hit. It's another reason why the cost of the ammunition for it is so expensive. So if your players are trying to build new guns and things like that, then definitely you can take inspiration from real world things, but use this table included with the class as a guideline. So the other thing you get at the third level, and we've been spending a lot of time on third level because this is a bit of a complicated class, is you get what's called Adept Marksman, which gives you access to grits and trick shots. Grits is a new resource for gunslingers, where effectively you have as many grit points as you do your wisdom modifier, so it's tied to your wisdom mod. And anytime you use a crit shot, to trick shot, you will burn a grit. Now, you can earn grit back by getting nat 20s on your attack roll. So, kind of going along with the idea that fighters get more attacks, with the gunslinger, it's is really advantageous to be making as many attacks as possible, because every time you roll a 20, you're going to be getting grit back, which you use for your trick shots, which modifies those many attacks. So the Adept Marksman really puts a large emphasis on keep attacking as much as possible. That also means the reload property on firearms becomes even more important, because something like bad news, which is reload 1, means half of your attacks you have to give up so that you can reload it, which can severely limit your ability to earn good grit back and severely limit your ability to use trick shots. Now, you learn 2 trick shots at the third level, and then you learn another trick shot at 7th, 10th, 15th, and 18th level, meaning by 18th level, you have a total of 6 trick shots. We'll go over the different trick shots at the end here, but to suffice it to say, there are only 8 of them. So by 18th level, you learn almost every trick shot. You're only missing 2. Which I'm not particularly fond of. I think I'm a huge fan of having you learn maneuvers or something that allows you to differentiate yourself from another player playing the exact same class. However, I personally think however many you can eventually learn, there should be at least double the number of things to learn. Otherwise, it's basically just becomes, oh yeah, we're all going to have the same thing by the time we reach 18th level. And if there are ones that are just clearly better, you're not really going to feel like you're different from another gunslinger. It's one of the reasons I liked the Battlemaster fighter, because there are a lot of maneuvers. You can't learn all of them. And they work in very, very different ways. Having more trick shots, I think, would just make this class a little bit more, or this subclass, a little bit more unique. But hey, it is what it is. They're still really interesting. And again, they fit with the fighter theme of they make a lot of attacks really well. And then anytime it asks for a saving throw, your trick shot save DC is based on your dex mods. So the Gunslinger is a dex-based fighter. A lot of people think of fighters as, me has strength. In 5th edition, ranged fighters and dex-based fighters are just about as common. I think strength-based fighters might be a little bit more common, but not by much. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Ranger was so kind of lukewarm and underpowered that people that wanted to play that kind of ranger feel would take fighter and then just be a ranged fighter, and maybe go like battle master and be a ranged fighter that could do cool stuff with their arrows, stuff like that. So yeah, this is definitely a dex-based fighter. I like dex-based fighters. It's different from the kind of stereotype me hit thing with a sword. So yeah. At 7th level, you get Quick Draw, which does two things. One, you can add your proficiency bonus to your initiative. That's huge. Again, going first in combat can mean the difference between an enemy getting an attack and an enemy not getting an attack. When you combine it with the trick shots you can do, gunslingers very quickly become an action economy manipulator, because they can do things like impose disadvantage, or move enemies, so they have to waste more actions getting close into the things like that. So being able to act first is really, really important. In addition, you can also stow a firearm and then draw another of a firearm as a single object interaction on your turn. And this is something I don't see a ton of gunslingers using when I see people play them. But it's really important. The thing about the gunslinger and the reason they have that list of all those different weapons is you can really kind of customize how you want to play your gunslinger on the fly. Like if you have, let's say you have a pistol, and well, let's go with the Percy example. He had the pepper box and he had bad news. Using that swap mechanic where you can do it without wasting an action or anything like that means you could effectively start every combat with bad news, fire your first shot to do a ton of damage, instantly switch out to your pepper box and start loading shots into people without having to worry about missing actions. If you have something like a hand mortar, or they used to have a scatter shot, they got rid of it because it didn't really fit with the theme. But if you wanted to create a shotgun kind of thing, which is what the scatter shot was supposed to be doing, being able in the middle of combat to just go, hey, hand mortar, boom, or hey, a blunderbuss, boom, pull out the pistol, boom, is really useful, and can be used in a lot of different ways. One of the ways a lot of people don't think about is if you've ever played Assassin's Creed 4, one of the things you get is you get pistols in that game, and you get multiple. You can get a vest that can carry up to 4 of them, which means you can make these quick fire shots by literally just pulling up a pistol, firing, putting it back into the holster, which he had the holster on his chest here. So you'd pull it out, fire, you'd pull the second one out, fire, stow the first as you're firing, pull the fourth out, and you could fire 4 times in succession. Translating that and these were one-shot flintlock pistols, so reloading them took a bit of time. Changing that to the gunslinger, let's say you have, because a pepper box is a bit more complex. Let's say you've got 2 pistols. They're reload 4, misfire 1, meaning you get 4 shots with each of them, and you do action surge. Well, with any other or even with a pepper box, you're going to have to waste one of your attacks reloading somewhere in that action surge. However, if you had 2 pistols and this quick draw, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, switch 1, 2. If you're 11th level, you'd have a total of 6 attacks. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, switch 1, 2, and you still have another shot next to turn, so you're not wasting any of your action surge. And since action surge can end a fight, that can be really, really useful. Or again, if we go back to the kind of bad news thing, you could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with a pepper box, stow it, pull out bad news, and get your final attack with the massive 2d6 piercing damage monstrosity sniper rifle that you have. Most gunslingers I've seen only use quick draw as their bonus to initiative. They're not switching guns very much, which is a huge kind of disservice to the class itself, because the ability to change weapons without using an action, because you get a free object interaction every turn, is a big deal, and it really can define the class itself. And again, if you carry like Assassin's Creed, if you carry 4 pistols on you, you can go a full you can go a full 4 turns without ever reloading. Which again, in 5th edition, most combat will never make it to 10 rounds. Most combat is ended within 5. So if you've got 3 or 4 pistols on you, which is not a bizarre thing when you think of a gunslinger, like having a pistol on each hip and maybe one in a back holster or in a shoulder holster or something like that. Doesn't sound strange, and you can just keep switching them out whenever you need a new weapon. So yeah, I think it's really underutilized, and I think it's a really interesting way to do that. On the same route, using multiple weapons also means you can get around misfires sometimes. Which can be useful as well. So use that. If you're playing a gunslinger, use quick draw a lot, and spend most of your downtime making at least one backup weapon, if not 2 or 3, because they're really, really useful. At the 10th level, you get what's called rapid repair. You can spend a grit point to attempt to repair a misfired but not broken firearm as a bonus action. Again, if a weapon misfires, you have to use a action to fix it, which means, especially for fighters, losing an action means losing multiple attacks. Rapid repair means you burn a grit and you get your weapon back very quickly. And again, by level 11, that's 3 attacks. 3 chances you could earn that grit back that turn. So rapid repair, really, really useful. It's one of those the things that I believe most gunslingers should leave at least 1 grit in reserve. For a rapid repair, seen as especially depending on the weapon you're using. If you're using something like a hand mortar or like a bad news kind of thing, that's a misfire 3. You have a 15% chance anytime you roll of misfiring with those weapons. And if you're doing more complex stuff where your players are creating their own guns, they might have even higher misfire scores. So rapid repair is super useful. 15th level, you get what's called lightning reload, which is a game changer. Starting from 15th level, you can reload any firearm as a bonus action. So now you can get the full use of your attack action instead of constantly having to reload. And since all firearms have the loading property, that means you actually have to have a hand free to actually reload it. So the kind of dual wielding gunslinger, there are ways to do it, but it requires finagling in some feats to be slightly modified. The Gunslinger, as it's written here, is not meant to be the kind of thing that you used to see in like old westerns. It's designed to be a single gun or a rifle kind of thing. So, yeah. So that since you're not using your bonus action for additional attacks, if you were like to dual wielding, you can that makes it really useful, especially again during those action surges. Now I will make the emphasis: quick draw, even with the bonus action reload, quick draw is still really useful because you only get one bonus action per turn. So if you're using something that does have a low reload, like a palm pistol is reload 1, or blunderbuss or bad news are also reload 1. So even with the bonus action, you're still burning at least one attack per turn to reload it. With quick draw, you can still fire off a couple shots from the powerful thing, then switch over to something like a pistol or a pepper box to make things that much you to get that much more out of your attacks. So yeah. And then at 18th level, you get to two things, which is interesting. It's not really common for 18th level abilities, but 18th level abilities should be really powerful. So, not unwarranted, just a little bit unique. The first thing you get at 18th level is called Vicious Intent, which basically it changes your crits to being on a 19 or to 20, and you get your grit back on a 19 or a to 20. So expanded crits, which is really useful. It's one of the best parts about the champion fighter archetype, because by the time they get to high levels, they crit all the way down, I think, to it's either an 18 or it's just a 17. Yeah, at 15th level, you crit on 18, 19, and 20 with the champion. So that's, one of the big reasons to take the champion is you just crit a ton. This allows you to crit with your firearms a lot better, which also means firearms that you roll multiple to the dice for become that much more powerful. Specifically, the blunderbuss and bad news both roll 2 dice instead of 1, which means when you crit on it, you'll be rolling 4 dice instead of 2. So yes, that can be really useful for you. The other thing you get at 18th level is called Hemorrhaging Critical, which is whenever you score a critical hit on an attack with a firearm, the target additionally suffers half the damage from the attack at the end of its next turn. So you effectively make them bleed out. Probably why they call it Hemorrhaging Critical. This is another thing that working hand in hand with the many attacks you get as a fighter, the action surge that you can use, using lightning reload and quick draw to get as many attacks as possible, and now you crit a lot more, which will earn you good grit back, which allows you to do more trick shots. Like everything builds on itself to make a really solid, powerful fighter. So yeah, love that. Love what it does to the class. And as an 18th level of ability, it should be pretty powerful, and it is. And it fits so well with how the fighter is already built. So trick shots. Again, the trick shots are the things that are going to add kind of complexity to the class and really take it from just I do lots of damage to a more controller action economy focused role. So let's go through them. The first one is called bullying shot. Which basically you can use a grit point while making a charisma intimidation check to gain advantage on the roll. You literally take your gun out and shoot it to intimidate people. It's really interesting. I like the fact that there are trick shots you can use outside of combat. This is the only one. But for the entire subclass, there aren't any non-combat abilities. Like this entire subclass is entirely combat focused, which isn't true about most other ones. With like the Eldritch Knight, you can get non-combat spells for it, and so stuff like that. Most subclasses will have at least one thing where you get a non-combat ability. Bullying shot is the only non-combat ability for the gunslinger, and I think it's interesting. I also think the impacts of firing your weapon in a town or something to intimidate someone can have huge impacts on how the town looks at you. So I think that particular trick shot really makes for an interesting character, because if you're using it all the time, people are probably going to view your character pretty negatively. Whereas if you use it very sparingly, anytime you use it could be a way for you to kind of emphasize that your character is extra invested in this moment, so they're willing to do something kind of brutish in order to get what they want at that specific point. So either way, I think it's cool, and it can really be an interesting way to play the character. Second one is dazing shot, which on a hit, the creature must make a con save or suffer disadvantage on attacks until the end of their next turn. Not only is this going to affect their attack rolls, which is total action economy manipulation, on their turn, any opportunity attacks they make will be made with a disadvantage as well. So dazing shot can be really, really effective if one of your squishies gets into a situation that they need to get out of quickly. Dazing shot can help immensely with that. On the flip side, you also have Deadeye shot, which is probably one of the most useful abilities, because what it does, it gives you advantage on the attack roll. That is always useful. And again, since you get grit back by critting, Deadeye shot can actually generate grit for you. And again, in those situations where you need the attack to hit, Deadeye shot is always useful. If you multi-class, which I normally don't mention multi-classing in these, a lot of times because multi-classing, other than like doing a single dip or maybe 2 levels into another class to get their defining features, a lot of times multi-classing takes away so many of the most powerful abilities for the class. And in things like casters, multi-classing doesn't allow you to learn higher level spells when you should, make you kind of underpowered to other ones. However, every so often taking a level or two can really create unique characters, especially at low levels. With Deadeye shot, if you were to multi-class into Rogue to get their sneak attack damage right at level 1, Deadeye shot can be exceedingly useful, because to get a sneak attack, one of the easiest ways to get it is just have advantage on the roll. And then combine that with critting and the things like that, where sneak attack does even more damage. I can definitely see someone taking, especially as a gunslinger, taking 1 or 2 levels in rogue just to get that sneak attack damage, because it can be super useful. Next one up is the disarming shot. All of these, by the way, they require a hit, and they still take the damage from the hit as normal. If there's any that you don't actually get a hit, it doesn't actually hit the target, I'll make mention of it. So a disarming shot, target must succeed on a strength save or drop one held object of your choice and have that object be pushed to 10 feet away from you. So this is another thing that can be really useful for action economy manipulation, or in situations where death is not the lose condition of the fight. There are a lot of combat encounters you can run where instead of, oh, we have to kill all these guys or they're going to kill me, it can be as simple as we need to stop this person from getting away because they have something important. It might be the phylactery for a necromancer. It might be the key that you need to release all the prisoners before the dragon comes and kills you, or anything like that. I think it's a really interesting kind of combat encounter where your goal is to get something from the enemy, not to kill everything. Because the enemies can make very different choices when their goal is to just allow one of them to escape instead of killing you. They might use more grapples. They might destroy the area that you're in to make it more difficult for you to get places. They might even use spells that cause difficult terrain and things like that, specifically to make it so you can't get the other enemy, which is something that a lot of players are not quite used to. They're used to the enemies doing everything they can to kill them, and that's how they will do. That's how they will focus their tactics. But if the tactic for the enemy is just to slow you down, that's a significantly more difficult thing to fight against. So disarming shot can be super useful in a situation where you need to get something from someone. In addition, it also can just be super useful for action economy manipulation, especially if you're on a multi-level in multi-level combat where there's high points and low points, or maybe cliffs. If you can maneuver someone to a point where they're within 10 feet of a drop-off or a cliff, and you shoot their weapon out of their hand off a cliff, they now can only make unarmed strikes, which do 1 point plus your strength mod. So instead of like a giant doing like 2d6 or the 3d8 damage with their massive club, you knock it off a cliff, and they can do 1 plus their strength mod, which is still going to be 6 or 7 damage, but it's not 14 or to 20 damage, or even higher. Yeah, disarming shot can be super useful. Combined with that, forceful shot. This one, it's a strength save or be pushed 15 feet away from you. And one of the things with both of these, because it's about being away from you and not just moving for the 15 feet, that does mean the gunslinger really benefits from hyper mobility. Things like taking the movement feat, which increases your speed, can be really useful. Things like haste can be really useful, not just because they get an additional attack, but because their movement speed is doubled. Or long strider, the things like that, so they can move around and get to the exact point they want in order to move creatures where they want them to disarm them with a combination of forceful shot and disarming shot. As long as there's a place where you could lose a weapon, using both of those things, you can disarm enemies pretty easily. And that can be really, really useful, especially for something like a mage. Mostly because, or a wizard, any spellcaster, mostly because the way spellcasting works is if you have a spellcasting focus, you don't need the material components of any of your spells unless they have a monetary value. So if you can get rid of a wand or a staff that an enemy spellcaster is using as their spellcasting focus, they can't cast any spells with material components unless they also happen to have a component bag on them with the components that they need. The same can be true, DMs, if you're playing with if you're using a gunslinger type enemy against your party, using the disarming shot to get rid of their spellcasting focus can be a massive blow, because again, it limits the spells that they can cast, which is a big deal. There are a lot of spells with material components that people don't even think about because they can just use their spellcasting focus for it. Super useful against the spellcasters in general. Combine it with a forceful shot, and you can do some major stuff. Next one, piercing shot. This one is interesting because it increases your misfire score by 1. So this one actually can cause a lot of issues. On a hit, the creature suffers normal damage, just like everything else, and you make an attack roll with disadvantage against every creature in a line directly behind the target within your first range increment. But only the initial attack can misfire. So if you roll your misfire score on the subsequent ones, it's not a big deal. Piercing shot is an AoE style attack that only costs a grit. Now, again, you're rolling with disadvantage, which kind of sucks. However, as you get to higher levels, you're going to be missing a lot less, simply because your dex score gets higher, your proficiency bonus gets higher, and armor classes don't get that much higher. Once you get to around the 18 to 20 armor class range, that's most characters, are most monsters. Their maximum armor class is going to be 18 to 20. Some of the really high end ones might have like a 22 or to 24. But a lot of the time, you're not going to be dealing with them, and you're definitely not going to be piercing shot them, because most of those are really big creatures. So this can be a great way to take out multiple creatures or do just extra damage. Even with the disadvantage, it's still theoretically possible, though improbable, that you will crit, which, again, if you're 18th level, that Hemorrhaging Critical would mean even more damage. You could be getting grit backs, stuff like that. So, and it does specifically say only the initial attack can misfire. It doesn't say anything about getting grit backs. So, super useful there. Next is violent shots. This one, you can actually burn multiple grit on a single shot. For each grit point suspended, the attack gains a +2 to the firearm's misfire score. If it hits, you can roll 1 additional weapon damage to the die per grit point spent when determining the damage. So, It increases the misfire score by 2, which is pretty impressive. Statistically, that's a 10% increase in the chance to misfire. However, an additional damage die is an additional damage die. If you're using this with something like a bad news style weapon, that's an additional D12 per grit point. Now, since its misfire is already at the 3, 1 grit turns it to 5, 2 grit turns it to 7, 3 grit turns it to 9, and you're almost at a 50% chance to misfire. But if you happen to have advantage on the shot, which earlier versions actually had Deadeye Shot, you could add that to any attack. I don't think you can do that anymore. Yeah, it specifically says you can only use 1 trick shot per attack, and they removed the ability to add Deadeye Shot to any attack. So you would not be able to combine Violent Shot with Deadeye Shot. However, if you already have advantage for whatever reason, Violent Shot can be very violent. Especially if you crit on it, and you get Hemorrhaging Critical, because they suffer half the damage of the attack. So the more damage the single attack does, the better it does. The other thing that this is nice for is breaking concentration. Again, concentration, the DC is 10 or half the damage they took. If you can do 30 damage in a single shot, that's a DC for 15. If you can do 40 damage, which if you combine Violent Shot with like Sharpshooter, which adds 10 damage onto it as long as you hit, and you can do a 40 or 50 damage shot, especially with a crit, and effectively make it impossible for any wizard or spellcaster to maintain concentration on any thing. So, yeah, super useful there. The final one they have is Winging Shot. They must make a strength save or be knocked prone. Again, prone is a super useful condition for action economy manipulation because it takes half their speed to stand up. And for melee fighters, because if you're within 5 feet, you get advantage on the attack rolls. For ranged fighters, you get disadvantage on the attack roll if they're prone. So Winging Shot is definitely a kind of combination to the thing where it's a teamwork ability, where at the end of your volley, you might throw on a Winging Shot to make it easier for the rest of your party to hit it, but it would not be something you would ever use at the beginning or in the middle of your attacks, simply because you're shooting yourself in the foot there. No pun intended. So, yeah, that's the Gunslinger. So for final thoughts on this, I really like the Gunslinger. Like I said before, it's a different class in the idea that a Gunslinger is going to play very, very differently from just about any other fighter subclass, but it works with the defining features of the fighter really, really well. Unlike the Dragon Monk, this changes the fighter in a good way. You can play a very unique fighter by playing a Gunslinger. DMs, for those of you that are worried that having a Gunslinger in your game is going to cause balance issues and stuff like that, seeing as, again, a lot of the firearms are very, very powerful. Remember the limiting factors. Keep track of reloads and misfires. Keep track of ammunition. In the game that I run that has a Gunslinger, I don't force him to keep track of his regular ammunition, mostly because I don't want to have to deal with that much math. But they're in a world where lycanthropes are super, super common. So he does have to keep track of silver ammo and any other ammo types that would be necessary for attacking more powerful creatures. In addition, he doesn't currently have a magic gun. So even having just not worrying about ammo until he finds a way to enchant his giga gun, he's doing half damage on a lot of the more powerful creatures. So those are the things you really need to focus on if you're worried about balance. Make them keep track of their ammo. And that means having the gunslinger just always going all out can be mitigated by controlling how much money the party gets, and giving them a lot of things to suspend their money on. Yeah. But beyond that, like I said, I really wish there were more trick shots. I think that there are other things you could do with trick shots other than the 8 they list here. But you pretty quickly start running into just basically copying the Battle Master's maneuvers eventually, which I wouldn't want to do because the Battle Master is already a really awesome, unique class, and just copying their maneuvers here would feel weird. So maybe someday I'll come up with a couple new shots, or maybe working with the Gunslinger in my Legend of the Three Kingdoms campaign. We'll come up with some different shots just to add more of a variety to it. But yeah, that's my only real quote unquote criticism of the class. Is either I'd like more trick shots, or I would like for them to be able to get less. Like maybe instead of getting 6, they only get 4, which then would mean you have double the number of trick shots that you can learn, which would add a little bit more customizability without sacrificing too much. Most of the gunslingers I see, they kind of get into a rhythm where they'll have 1 or 2 shots that they're just really good at making. And it also would make the choice of which trick shots you make be that much more impactful, because you would kind of build your character around the shots you can do. So that would probably be my only kind of criticism of it, is probably instead of just adding more to trick shots, which I still think would be interesting, I think it would be easier to just remove 2 of the additional trick shots they get. Probably I'd probably say remove the 10th level and the 18th level trick shots, additional trick shots, just because you're already getting something really good at 18th level and to the 10th level already. So it's not going to feel too bad losing those. So that would be my only criticism of it. Otherwise, as always, if you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. I know this one was longer, but it introduced a lot of different things in it. So like I said, hit the like button. It lets me know you liked it. It lets YouTube know you liked it, and it may help other people to see it as well. In addition, if you really like this stuff, hit that subscribe button. Like I said, Tasha's comes out in a couple days. As soon as it comes out, my first video is going to be a review, and everyone after that is going to be going hardcore into the new features and everything in it. So you'll definitely want to stay tuned for that. Be sure to hit the notification icon so you don't miss any of my videos. In the comments down below, I would like to know. I mentioned the firearms here: palm pistol, pistol, musket, pepper box, blunderbuss, bad news, hand mortar. What firearms do you think would be interesting to homebrew into this class? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.